Good morning, everyone. Thanks for coming out to part 2 of our Fun Talk Fridays with cloud services. This morning, we're going to talk about, last time we talked about the public cloud. This time, we're going to talk about the private cloud and some tools and technologies and data centers that you can go to build your own cloud or create hybrid clouds, maybe. We'll learn what that is as well. I'd like to introduce Russell Bryant. He went to Clemson University. We won't fault him too much for that. I'm a Georgia guy myself, and maybe we'll see each other in the national championship game this year. But he's a senior systems architect for Red Hat and one of the core members of a technology called OpenStack. And I'll let him talk to you about that. Thank you.
Yeah, thanks for the intro. So, yeah, I'm Russell Bryant. I work for Red Hat, but I live here in Charleston. This is where I'm from. And now that I work remotely for Red Hat, I moved back here because Charleston is such a great place. And so at Red Hat, I work in the CTO office, and in particular, I focus on OpenStack, the OpenStack open source cloud project, and also some related technologies, particularly in the networking side of that, is where I've been spending most of my time lately. And I want to talk to you guys today about take a quick look at what OpenStack is and what it might mean for you. So a few points, and it looks like the right side of my stuff's cut off, but it should be all right. A few things. So especially if there was a previous session on this, I think the benefits of cloud are clear. Cloud as a platform, as a model for consuming technologies is pretty well established, and your options are plentiful. You've got, in the public cloud space, you've got a lot of options, and then it gets more complicated when you actually have the option of getting that same type of infrastructure but in your own data center, and then maybe even using them in combination. So you've got a lot of options, and I think the choices you make are important. And it's not just important for your company. I think it's also important for the future of our industry. And I think when you make choices, you should be thinking about where do you want this industry to go, and the things that you pick, sort of help shape that. And there's a lot of different ways I think our industry can go in this space. And with that, we'll take a look at OpenStack. So OpenStack it's an open source project that it's about 5 years old for building clouds. And if we look at our mission statement, the mission statement is to produce the ubiquitous open source cloud computing platform that will meet the needs of both public and private clouds, regardless of size, by being simple to implement and massively scalable. So I highlighted some particularly important points in there. One is the openness part, and we take the openness of the project quite seriously, and I'll talk a little bit more about that. And also the public and private. So OpenStack's goal is it's building the software that lets you build a cloud. So someone who is going to start a public cloud business, you can build that on OpenStack. Or if you wanted this type of infrastructure for yourself, you can use OpenStack to do that. And I'll give a lot of examples of those. By being simple to implement and massively scalable. Massively scalable, I think we're doing well at. Simple to implement, I think it's just kind of funny looking back. I think it's an awesome goal, but it turns out massively scalable distributed systems, and simple are not necessarily easily compatible. But I think it's simple as a consumer of it. But it is, I think, a challenge to and take some technical expertise to get it to build it up and operate it. Okay, so if you take a look at OpenStack, it's not so different than if you go look at it in one of the your public cloud options. It's made up of a large selection of services. This is actually only a subset of them. There's actually quite a few more, but there's a service for compute, and they all have cute names. The compute service is called Nova. If you're familiar with Amazon's public cloud, that would be analogous to Amazon's EC2 service. Or Swift, this object store service, that's analogous to Amazon's S3 service. And so there's lots of these. There's also a bare metal provisioning service, which a lot of people use to, if you're building up your own cloud, you need something to bring up and provision your bare metal machines to begin with. There's also some interesting things people do with that one. If you want to be able to consume, full bare metal servers, but do it like in an agile way, in a dynamic way, as you do with, VMs in a cloud. Then you can do that with OpenStack. There's a web interface, a lot of services. So a big point here is just that it's a big collection of services. There's I don't know how many of them, 40 or 50 at this point, sort of tackling different parts of the problem space. And so when you go to build an OpenStack cloud, you actually have a lot of choice in terms of picking the pieces that you would want to use. And it all runs on Linux. And the slide says Red Hat Enterprise Linux. It's not a Red Hat specific thing by any means. It's Linux of choice. Actually runs on Windows as well, if you're into that. All right, so openness. I mentioned open was an important thing for OpenStack that it's in the name, but we take it quite seriously. So I want to explain different parts of open. So open source, and I think an open source project, there's my whole career has been around open source, and there's many, many different ways open source projects can be run, and it's more than just the code to do it well and to reap the full benefits. So it is open source, and it's Apache licensed. If you're familiar with licensing, it's a very, very open license. It's not open core, so there's some open source projects are like, yeah, it's like this piece is open, but like to get full value, you have to buy these proprietary add-ons, and it's not that. I mean, everything is open. The way it's designed is open. There's not people at a company that are sort of making important decisions in a closed room and then throwing the code over the wall. The process in which we we design it is open. We meet in person at a thing called the OpenStack Summit every 6 months. And we talk about what we're going to do for the upcoming release, and anyone can propose ideas for that, and then the whole process. It's all available to anyone. So the development process is all open. That means the code is it's in Git. We use a public code review system that anyone can jump in and review code on. All the way we track our roadmaps is all in the open, and the community is open. So there's a lot of things we try to do to make the community an open place for anyone to come in and join. So OpenStack is it's a collaboration of many companies. I'll talk about a lot of them coming up, and for that to be successful, we have to create an even playing field. It can't be like Red Hat sort of really kind of having control, because if any one company really has full control, then others aren't going to be quite as willing to invest and bet on it. So we do a lot of work to make sure that it's a level playing field for companies to come in and collaborate with each other. And that means doing things, having discussions, having meetings in the public as much as possible. And also when it comes to leadership, it's all elected leadership for the project, elected leadership for, so there's leaders of each individual project. There's a technical committee, which is a group of people that provides technical oversight for all of OpenStack, and I'm an elected member of that group. And then there's also a board of directors for the OpenStack Foundation, which handles the business side of OpenStack, and I'm also on the board of that foundation, and the membership of and the board is also elected. And we also have a nice wiki page that goes into some more details about the things we care about openness. So we care a lot about trying to do open well, and it shows off well on the size of our community. So I think another thing that's related to openness and is really, really important for cloud is that our values of openness also lead to values around interoperability. And the being this open source project, the fact that it's flexible and you have a lot of choice makes achieving full interoperability a challenge, but we're working on that. But I think interoperability is something that we should all be thinking about with cloud, because in cloud so far you've got these major public clouds, but these are proprietary things. This is vendor lock-in all over again. You go in and you build your stuff on that, and it's not easy to go move your stuff to another cloud. I don't think it is. If you really take advantage of the ecosystem, you don't have an easy time moving to something else. And that's the world I want to see. I want to see a world where I can take full advantage of what cloud offers, the services they provide, but if I don't like what that company's doing anymore, or another company comes along and offers maybe better services, better performance, better prices, whatever the case may be, I should be able to move over there as easily as possible. And that's the vision we have with OpenStack. And I think that's what we should all be shooting for our future. And I mentioned, it's complicated because as this open project, you have a lot of choice. And we're tackling that for a couple of ways. In the technical community, we try very hard. So from a compute perspective, I mentioned that's a project for creating VMs. And that's sort of this high-level concept, but there's a lot of different ways to create VMs. There's multiple open source hypervisors, and then you have commercial options. So on the open source side, you have Xen, KVM, but there's also VMware. There's Hyper-V. There's a lot of different hypervisor choices, and all of those things are supported with OpenStack. We do our best to make them in terms of how they implement their support under OpenStack, make them behave as close as possible as the same as we can. So we do a lot of work on the technical side. There's also a little bit of work on the business side to help on interoperability, and that's around trademark programs. So the OpenStack Foundation owns the OpenStack trademark, and there are trademark programs for all these people that are using OpenStack, whether they're allowed to use the OpenStack name or not. And so in the rules for whether you're accepted in a trademark program, it has to do with, okay, you built this thing and you're calling it OpenStack, but are you using the code that we say is OpenStack? And does it behave like OpenStack? So there's like a set of tests that the platform has to pass for it to be allowed to be called OpenStack. So we're trying to do our best to work toward a future where clouds are interoperable. So the OpenStack community, these are just some high-level metrics. There's 531 companies registered in our ecosystem that's broken down in a few different ways. The OpenStack Foundation has some top-level members. These are members that are paying significant amounts of money into the foundation. They're also investing significant amounts of resources into making OpenStack successful in terms of whether that's development or other things. Code contributors, I think, is also interesting. We've had over 4,000 people contributing actual code, and on average, on a monthly basis, 600 people contributing code. So it is one of the largest open source projects right now. And so I think that's pretty interesting. I mentioned that there's sort of this top tier of companies that are invested quite heavily into the success of OpenStack and the success of the foundation. And these are those companies. I'll have to go through them, but it's kind of a mix. There's a lot of technology vendors. There's a lot of interest from the telco side, and so it's just quite a big mix. And then there's also the supporting companies, and so that's kind of when people become supporting the foundation. You come at this level, and that does require a financial commitment. And you start here, and then you apply to become one of the member companies. And I put this up here because I can't put them all in there because there's over 100, but I wanted to point out one of them, which is Google Cloud Platform. And that's a recent one, and that's really huge. And so this is the first one of the major public clouds that has officially sponsored OpenStack, and that's important. And what they're saying is obviously they care about public cloud. They have their own public cloud, but they recognize that there are reasons and people are building their own clouds. That's a reality. And they're also saying that people are doing that with OpenStack. And so they're saying that they officially support that as their sort of the private cloud platform. And also they want to make that work well if you want to be able to move your stuff up to Google's cloud platform, or maybe use both OpenStack and Google's cloud at the same time. So I think that one's especially interesting. It was a nice milestone for us to reach here just a few months ago. We also have this OpenStack Summit. That's our conference, just kind of showing community growth. This happens every 6 months, and the last one was in Vancouver in May, and we had about 6,000 people there. Pretty big conference. Okay, so I mentioned public and private clouds, and let's talk about that a little bit more. So OpenStack can be used to build public clouds, and this is if you want to start a business that's offering public cloud services and effectively compete against the likes of Amazon and Google and Microsoft and so forth. Then OpenStack can be used to do that. OpenStack's actually been used much more for private clouds up to this point, but it can be done. There's a website that lists the public clouds that are out there. It's an easy way to kind of give OpenStack a try from a user standpoint. A couple of examples in the US are Rackspace Public Cloud. It's probably the biggest one. They're actually one of the founding companies that helped create OpenStack. And then there's another cloud called Dream Compute by a company called DreamHost. DreamHost is traditionally sort of a web hosting company, but they're also they're now offering an OpenStack-based infrastructure cloud. And private clouds. So what is private cloud? It's quite simple. You want the model of public cloud, you want that model of computing, but you want it in your own data center. And I think it's the majority of how OpenStack is used today. And I think there's a lot of reasons why people go the private cloud route, and I'm going to go through some examples of people that are using OpenStack to kind of maybe get some more insight. We also do a survey every 6 months that helps get us some additional insight. I put a link here that has a lot of good resources on this, a ton of detailed user stories on people that are using OpenStack that you can check out later if you'd like. Breakdown of industries. It's not surprising that the majority is just kind of general IT, but there's some other interesting things. Academic and research. That's an industry that has a lot of specialized needs. They're doing high performance computing. They end up needing a specialized hardware to do the types of processing they want. So a lot of times they have flocked to OpenStack to be able to get the model of computing that cloud can provide, but with the customizations that they want. Telecom is also a really interesting one. The telecom industry is traditionally, these expensive boxes with telco functions in them, and they want to be able to evolve their networks with the same flexibility and pace that the rest of the IT industry is able to get with cloud, but for their telco networks. And so they're adopting clouds, but then the actual workloads that are running on them are like super high performance packet processing telco functions. So that's a really interesting transformation we're seeing very recently. Geography, it's fairly well distributed, about half north. This is kind of from our user survey in terms of where the deployments of OpenStack are. Half North America, but also quite well adopted in Europe and Asia. All right, so this comes from our user survey, and it's exactly the question: what are your top business drivers for using OpenStack? And the number of responses that answer this question was 270. And I think there's some interesting insights in here. And the top three, I think, are things that are interesting and useful about cloud in general. And it actually has nothing to do with OpenStack being an open source project. It doesn't have to do with using OpenStack as a private cloud. It's just, why would you use cloud in general, right? Increase your operational efficiency, be able to innovate faster, save money. Like those are all things that are true if you're using one of the major open public clouds. But then you get into some of the other things, and I think they start to provide some insight into why you might choose OpenStack or why you might choose to build a public cloud. Build a private cloud. This one's big. This is, to me, avoiding vendor lock-in with an open platform and ecosystem, including flexibility of underlying technology choices. So that's the biggest reason people choose OpenStack and build their cloud, is they don't want to be locked into a vendor. And they want to be built on an open platform with choice. They want to be able to choose specifics about their hypervisor and make particular communication configuration options around that. They want to choose what storage technology they're using for their cloud. They want choice and control over those things. Some of the others standardize on the same open platform that powers a global network of public and private clouds. That's another important one. I mentioned that earlier. Do you want to be on a platform that has a vision of clouds working the same and being able to move workloads from one cloud to another? That's a reason people buy into OpenStack. Attract top technical talent by participating in active global technology community. That actually kind of surprised me, but it kind of makes sense. This is a huge active community, tons of brilliant technologists involved, and by getting your company involved, you sort of get to tap into that talent pool. And also security and privacy concerns. That's, I think, not too surprising to see come up on here. There are particular organizations that have the utmost concerns about the security of their infrastructure, and they're not quite willing to move to run on someone else's. And so that's a big reason people build their own OpenStack clouds. So our developers can iterate faster and get better productivity, get better product to our customers quicker. That speed and agility is something we find very important. And the bottom is cut off, but that was a quote from a guy named Justin, who works for Bloomberg. Now, Bloomberg is a financial services company. His quote is great. It's, again, to me, it's something that's true about any cloud. But for them, they want the power of cloud. They want the benefits that are provided, but they want their own data center because of they're a financial services company, and they have just regulations and huge privacy security concerns, so they're running their own data center. Another example: by holidays of last year, blank.com's entire U.S. production traffic was on OpenStack compute. Anyone want to guess? You probably won't guess.
Walmart.
Oh, you nailed it. You read the news. Good.
You got the presentation earlier.
Oh, you did? Yeah, you did get the presentation. Yeah.
I'm watching.
You win a marker. I don't know. So Walmart. So that's an example. And I think for Walmart, they're obviously they're huge. They have data centers. They have the expertise in building out data centers and managing them. And so they're like, well, we can do it ourselves. And also, I mean, for me, it's kind of funny to think about Walmart.com running on Amazon infrastructure. If you think about who's Walmart.com's competitor, Amazon. So they probably don't want to run on Amazon's infrastructure. So they built their own, and it's working really, really well for them. And so now they're finally talking about it. And this is sort of a graph of their build out. And they started dabbling in it in 2012, but by the holiday season last year, all of their web infrastructure was running on OpenStack, their own private OpenStack. And the graph is actually showing CPU cores. So by their holiday season, I think it was about 130,000 CPUs. And I don't know what the numbers are this year. They haven't really released too much about what their growth has been preparing for this year's holiday season, but that'll be interesting to hear. So I think that's a great example, and more of these types of stories are coming out. Here's another example, the National Security Agency. So, and we actually have, we've been gaining a little bit more insight into the types of things that they're doing and perhaps the amounts of data they store in the news in the last couple of years. So what do you think the National Security Agency really cares about? They probably care. They probably care about security. So of course they run their own infrastructure and they don't trust anyone else. And so they use OpenStack. And the lead of their OpenStack platform gave a keynote, and this is the details he shared about their deployment here. The number of users and how many systems they had. So he was making it the joke, and it was pretty hilarious at the time. So they actually won't share any details about how big it is. I've been led to believe that it's actually quite large, and I believe it based on the scale of the types of things they do and the amount of data they collect and the amount of data analysis they do. But the keynote is really interesting if you want to go back and watch it. He talks a bit about the journey of moving to a new platform in their organization. Interesting insight into some things about government, and also just things that are interesting to organizations in general. Just sort of a journey of adopting a new way of consuming computing. CERN is another example, if you're familiar with that physics lab over in Europe. With our OpenStack cloud, we've been able to offer physicists with the resources they need to analyze and model data from the LHC. That lab has millions of IP devices, just crazy amount of sensors, and the amount of data they produce that they need to analyze is just astounding. And they've been moving to OpenStack to build out the infrastructure they need to analyze all that data. 2 minutes? Okay, I'll blaze through. So that's really big, and they've been able to be successful with that. Some more companies that are using it, just kind of a quick slide, it's quite a mix. You've got financial companies, Yahoo, eBay, Comcast, tons of different things. And I mentioned telcos earlier. There's also quite a lot of adoption in telcos. They're running OpenStack because they want flexibility of OpenStack to run their infrastructure. And there's a Forrester report you can go read. It's made publicly available. It's called OpenStack is Ready Are You? And it goes through lots of details about the sort of OpenStack's maturity level and how it's being adopted. One interesting thing that's in the report is that 82% of OpenStack clouds interact with other clouds, which I think is even higher than I expected, but also drives them home the point of that we really need a future that values interoperability between clouds. Largest environment they surveyed was 200,000 CPU cores, but there's quite a few that are in the 100,000 plus range actually that are becoming more and more public. And the last thing I want to note is, so I kind of tried to drive home this point, but if you value an open cloud future and the things of openness and interoperability, I think you should give OpenStack a try because I think your choices do help shape the future. So thank you very much.
Thank you.
You got to dump some?
Okay, thanks, Russell. Really appreciate that. And with that, I want to introduce another Clemson grad, Brad Alexander. He's the Senior Director of Management Services at Envion, and he's going to share with us more information about the private cloud.
So I think this will be a good perspective. The point of view we're coming from an ecosystem standpoint is exactly the same. So you're going to hear ecosystem, you're going to hear workflow migration, workflow portability. You're going to hear a lot of that stuff. But what you're going to notice the key difference is we are a VMware shop. Why we are a VMware shop, we're going to get into that and some of the differences of public, private, VMware, OpenStack. I'm kind of going to go through that, and then I'm going to go through the vision of where a Median sees the cloud, and it is fantastic getting to go after you because it's the same roadmap that the major cloud providers, the open source frameworks, everybody keeps talking about the same thing: a cloud ecosystem with seamless, transparent mobility. So, a little bit about the cloud we're going to cover today, and then we're going to talk about infrastructure as a service, and then leave some time for some questions. So, state of the cloud. Took this directly from Nick Weaver, and I met Nick when I was in Vegas a couple years ago, and he talks a lot about the way cloud technology works, how it shifts, and makes the landscape change. But we have a mixture of dead ends and new roads. New concepts like containers, DevOps, platform as a service are altering the way we do cloud computing. So you guys, developers, how many developers do we have in the room? See, so it's fantastic. So your group are the ones who are pressing the infrastructure, traditional IT to change. As soon as I say the word containers, people perk up now. You guys have been using containers for a while, and you've been writing towards services, not necessarily virtual machines. And I'm going to show a comparison of what I mean by containers and why this matters coming up. But you guys are going to help us transform the problem we face. Most of the challenges in 2015 will be driven by simple business metrics. Cloud margins will continue to fall, and enterprises have yet to fully develop cloud-specific applications. So take the hypervisor out, take the framework out, and think about it day to day as a consumer of application. You got an ERP that runs your business. You got a messaging system that runs your business. Well, if you're still maintaining and developing and coding towards something you may have written, this legacy, this client server, where do those go? So OpenStack is a fantastic framework to be able to build a new greenfield, drop stuff in, but what about if it's something you've been pulling that started out as an IBM application and somehow got ported into an x86 application that you're now running on .NET? Where do they go? And that's where we come in. So we talk a little bit about enterprise IT as a whole is not ready. So if you look, circa 1995 type stuff, physical storage, well-defined stack. You don't hear a lot about middleware anymore, but very, very common. You got OS, you got runtimes, now we have a full application stack. And then thick, and even some of the thin is still an older model, right? Now we look at how you guys are developing, and you're developing toward an available service. Doesn't matter who offers that service now. So, say you're building a web front end. Well, you develop toward a service that uses web, and say you're using a Mongo service on the back end. You're not supporting your Mongo infrastructure anymore. You're just supporting the data that's being consumed into Mongo, and that's what we see more and more of. The problem still. I'm getting a little ahead of myself. So, containers versus VMs, before we get into some of the problems. Here's what we do. Here's what we've been doing as an infrastructure as a service company for quite a while. You got servers, hosts, you got hypervisor. Again, we're VMware shop today. Have guest OS, and they're all encapsulated in a single virtual machine. So that virtual machine is a bucket that does X. You can put multiple things on a VM. You guys understand that. What we have here now is, in particular, Docker is an easy example. When I have a bunch of applications running on a single abstraction layer, so now you can develop toward the service you need with shared libraries, shared bins that can be offered through an ecosystem. You can go to Google, you can go to OpenStack, you can go to AWS, you can go to vCloud Air, you can bring it back home because you've written toward a service, not an infrastructure or a single virtual machine. So the challenges that we see. Again, so a Median operates in what we call tier 2 markets. So we're not NFL cities. So you get NFL cities and you start to see a little bit of an advancement in terms of technology. where they're at already. They can already do a little bit of workload, portability. You have an ecosystem in Atlanta, for instance, built. The problem becomes, what about the local and the regional players who need something? I want to build my own private cloud, or I want to use a provider that's nearby, in town, because of connectivity. Everybody overlooks the connectivity piece and how important that is. There are times when your application has to be close to your end users. And when you're building traditional client-server applications, how do you do it? You move them to AWS, how do you stay close to it? Well, you choose the East region, you choose the West region, that's great. They allow private connectivity, but it's not as easy as saying, hey, we have a local provider, I'm going to use a local telco. That local telco is going to pull a super high-speed, inexpensive connection in. I'm going to build private, and I'm going to extend to public. I'm going to use it, consume it the way that I want, and I'm going to provide the best experience to my end users. So that's where we see some major value. So today's challenge is workload portability, how we get from point A to point B. If you build the private cloud in VMware, Hyper-V, OpenStack, doesn't matter what happens if you want to stop. Stop doing it yourself and you want to take it somewhere. Pick it up and move it, either piece by piece or in its entirety. Complicated billing. If you've ever dealt with AWS, it's complicated, not just to deploy, but what are you going to pay next month? Are you persistent? Are they going to tear down? Are you spinning up? Are you shutting down? How much? What is your input? What is your transfer? Stuff like that becomes complicated if you're not an IT shop. If you're a business wanting to consume IT, then let's make IT easy for the business to consume. It's targeted at web and hyperscale companies, I call. If you're familiar with development models, a P3 type model where you build toward services, you build toward the ability to use whatever you need, consume what you need wherever you like. Quality performance. You'll see guaranteed SLAs where I guarantee you X amount of IOPS, I guarantee you X amount of latency. What we're seeing now is the mind frame of we're going to continue to sprawl and we're going to have 40 of these, and if one is not functioning correctly, I destroy it and I got 39 and a new one spawns. Well, that's fantastic, and I hope everybody gets there. But today, how do I do that with Microsoft Dynamics? You guys might not use Dynamics, but there are a lot of people who do use Dynamics. That's a huge thing that we hear. So how do we do it with those legacy ERP? How do you do it with Exchange, with Microsoft Exchange? So when you start to deal heavily in the Microsoft stack, you start to see where the applications really fall down. Control. Everybody wants control. They want to be able to do anything they want. They want to be able to move it, and they want to control VMs all the way down to the host layer, to the network virtualization layer, to control security. We start to talk about the federal agencies. A great example. Well, they're not going to trust their underlying security, not just the front end, not just where they have their security suite. They're talking about how do they get penetrated behind the firewall. Because of the risk of getting through the firewall, well, anybody can get through a firewall now. You can find a way around the security suite. How far down are you still hardened? That's where the control comes in. You can harden each layer, and you can harden even into the network virtualization layer. And then support for legacy applications and operating systems. So I put together a quick slide, and I'd love for you to speak up if you notice that this doesn't articulate OpenStack well enough, okay? So again, we're a VMware shop. So VMware caters to 2 decades of accumulated enterprise IT, and it focuses on data center automation. So you're going to notice directly to the right, for OpenStack, you take those two. You're catering toward greenfields and cloud applications. You're also focused on intelligent scaling of the platform. You talked about the massive scalability. Well, when VMware was built, it was a consolidation thing. It wasn't how much I could scale it. It was how much stuff could I get rid of and put it in one box. So now we got functionality layered around hypervisor to handle security, data availability, and resource accounting. So you'll notice that there's a lot of plugins that you run now. Everybody's developing a plugin that integrates with vCenter. Well, that plugin's controlling something in the stack. Well, with OpenStack, you're focused on automating the entire infrastructure in a uniform way. When he talks about, Neutron and Nova and how these things all bolt together and it was built to all talk and seamlessly scale, grow, destroy. VMware was not built that way. So it's two different problems we solve. So I look at them and say, if you're going to build a new application, why wouldn't you use an OpenStack type technology? If you still have enterprise apps that are still hanging around that you got to support, why not hop into the cloud? Why not get the advantages of the scalability of infrastructure as a service? And that's where we come in. So I put together a little vision statement, and this is where, I feel that the cloud is going to go, especially where we are and what we do, to provide a secure, scalable, and highly reliable cloud ecosystem, which provides full interoperability across all cloud deployment models, public, private, and hybrid, thereby allowing your customers to strategically place workloads on the best platform, provider, or geographic location, and it may be a combination of any, and support the unique requirements of each enterprise application. So what we see is a mix of OpenStack, VMware Private Cloud, maybe some Microsoft Azure SQL services being consumed, but that entire ecosystem, you put what you need at the best place. Sounds great in theory, but how do we do it? How are you going to control it? Is there a single interface that you're going to use? Do you have to write something? So of course we can all develop. We can develop toward the APIs, write a single control panel and do whatever we want. But everybody doesn't have that type talent. And there are companies that focus, they need their business people or their IT people to focus on the business, not trying to innovate IT. So this is where Cloud Federation comes in. So transparent cloud hosting, where you pick up a workload, you move it around. Starts here, moves there. Single billing account. All right, I'm partially in AWS, I'm partially in vCloud Air, I'm partially in a Medion's network, and I'm partially at my own private data center. Single billing model, consumed here, one person to one place to send you a bill. Resource usage. Resource usage is, you can pick and say, I want one bucket at one provider, I want one bucket at another provider, but you see in the totality what your environment looks like. So instead of seeing what AWS looks like, and then what your private cloud resources are, and what's free here and there, we can bubble all those up and say, here's what you have in your ecosystem. So should I do QA in AWS this week? Because I notice I have open resources right now in AWS that I've already bought credits for. Well, Azure just gave me 400 extra monthly credits. Let me put some stuff out there. Why? Because it's free. Having a single way to do that. And then we talk about this federation. You'll hear me talk a little bit about cloud.net. And cloud.net is our cloud management platform. It's the federation that sits above it. So we talk about total transparency, what we want to deliver, and how we want people to consume workloads are, you go out to the providers, you choose the provider with the best performance metric. So say there becomes a standard scale for clouds. You score from 0 to 100, or there may be multiple categories, but you have a number. You have an uptime number. You choose what you want. If I need to have 100% uptime, I want a cloud provider that's been up 100% of the time, and they have a sliding performance index scale of 72, which means that they're high on the ranking list. That's the provider I want for this application. I see that their price is $17 an hour for a particular instance, where I can buy it for $13 somewhere else if I'm willing to deal with reduction in availability and performance. So the ability to go and look at a marketplace and choose where I want to be. We want to be able to deploy again where we want based off price and the performance and geographic needs that we see that particular application needing. So I had to throw a buzz in because we talk about cloud.net, we talk about the cloud management platform, and we are the first vCloud Air on-app partner. So that is globally, and OnApp is a cloud management platform that was built from the ground up to support KVM and Zen. So it is storage appliances, DR as a service, backup as a service, all consolidated single control panels, but they had no support for VMware. So last year at VMworld, I took some time to sit and talk with the chief architect at OnApp, and talked a little bit about what do the VMware guys do. So we're a vCloud shop. What do we do? vCloud's UI went away. So how are we supposed to continue? What if I don't have an army of developers? How do I get in an ecosystem? How do I get a control panel that I can help deliver this vision that I want to deliver? So what they did was we met, inked some paper with vCloud Air, and said, all right, vCloud Air needs a control panel. These guys agreed, hey, let us try to be the control panel for vCloud Air. Now there's others, there's people who develop it, there's a lot of different things there, but we signed with ONAP, we signed with vCloud Air so that we can build this cloud federation based off AWS, VMware, and any other cloud provider that we want to put in our federation. Okay, so it's not so much the technology behind it, it's the providers who are providing it. And a Medion also has private clouds, which can be, we call them public, but they sit and we control them in our data centers. So say you want to bring your firewall in, you want to bring it into our facility, and you want to consume resources in our Ladson facility. That's fine. You don't have to reach out. You still get the benefits of a cloud provider, the scalability, the ability to have single source for billing, the portability across networks. But yet it sits right beside your edge-facing gear, your MPLS, or your firewall. You can control it. You can consume it. The data lives in one of the Medion facilities. You can choose to do, have a second, have DR, have zoning. You can do all of that through a local provider as well. So, the way that we describe cloud, custom cloud engineered with more flexibility. We own the data center network cloud. So the slide got changed a little bit yesterday right before it came out. To be quite honest and transparent, this is what a Medion delivers. We talk about it. We wanted to kind of be vague around how we see cloud, but in the end, by the time we get to this point, these are some of the key things that we see a Medion and other local providers and other cloud providers like us can provide you in the problems that we can solve that the AWSs of the world don't necessarily solve very easily. So custom cloud engineering, one of the big things. If you're not a cloud expert or an infrastructure or a virtualization expert, have someone sit across the table from you for an hour and just say what problem you're trying to solve. You guys know how to code. You can code around all kind of stuff, but you can't code around the fact that you got 3,000 milliseconds of latency at your DB layer. Still gonna suck. So how do we fix that? Talk to us. Let us understand what you need. I don't want to take your applications. I don't want to take your IT people. I just want to provide you with infrastructure that meets the requirements that you need, and it reduces or eliminates the lock-in. I have to prove myself every single minute that my performance is good, that my compute's up, that my reliability's up, because you can hit a button and you can leave me if I don't prove it. So I prove it, which comes into the multiple levels of control, but SLA-backed performance guarantees. I track. I tell you I'm going to give you X, I'm going to give you X. If I don't give you X, you're going to pack up and leave. So we hold ourselves extremely high and around our SLAs and how we handle performance. Integrated backup and disaster recovery. You don't have to really worry about zoning. You don't have to worry about am I in zone A, am I on zone B, how many copies I have. You just purchase a service from us and say, hey, I have a disaster recovery need. It needs to be X amount of miles apart. Do you have any facilities, or do you partner with any facilities that you can do this? And we pick them up, we move them. You have second copies to the second type copies, and we build a DR plan with you. Keep it simple. We don't have to worry about writing a bunch of stuff to handle DR. We're going to help develop the network portion of this, and then we're going to help migrate you from point to point throughout your disaster recovery piece. We make cloud adoption easy. So for people who currently run VMware, currently run Hyper-V, may already be in the AWS cloud, we have mechanisms that we say, hey, come to us. We'll just pick them up and bring them to you. We'll pick them up and bring them, and we'll import them in. You don't have to rebuild them. Say you got an old Windows Server 2003 box that's running a SQL server that runs your entire ERP. You can't get rid of it. You're just stuck in it. You've been trying to. You're developing. The developers are trying to get things better. Can't get around it, but it's still physical. It's got 16 gigs of RAM. The box is so old it can't do anything else. Let us P2V it. Let us take it from physical to virtual, put it in our infrastructure, take it to 64 gigs of RAM, take it from having two 15K spindles to 2,000 SSDs pooled. Well, we can fix a lot of problems by throwing performance at it until you can get to the point where you need to be, or your vendors get to the point of building these new elastic service-based applications. And then we offer a full 24/7 by 365 support model. Pick up the phone, call us. We're staffed 24/7 at all the facilities. You pick it up, you talk to an engineer. You don't wait in line, you don't have to buy another service contract. It's part of the service. My VM's down. My application's dead. Well, we don't support your application. I don't know who else to call. Sure, let us try. We'll help. Ability to deploy custom images, so we can build full blueprint stacks, top to bottom, that are tailored towards you. So you need a lamp stack, you need it designed a particular way. Well, we can build it, put it in your catalog, and you just hit deploy, and it'll build you a full, 3-tiered, 10-server lamp stack. Full line of service provider licensing. We have SPLA licensing so that you guys can buy stuff, pay monthly for basically any piece of hardware or any piece of software in a Microsoft stack as well as a Rails stack. Bring your legacy stack one piece at a time. Say you got a new storage array, bring it. Connect to our compute. Wait till your storage array depreciates and is gone. So types of services. We pretty much went through this. I'm going to skim over it, and this is a little plug. So Medion is a data center provider. We have 5 data centers throughout South Carolina and North Carolina. We have deep connectivity between our facilities, and we connect into Atlanta, Ashford, Virginia, and Charlotte for peering. So we can touch any major provider in the major cities and backhaul connectivity. So if you say, well, I use CenturyLink and you're not on net with CenturyLink. Well, yes, I can pick up CenturyLink out of Atlanta. Well, I need to do direct compute with Google Compute. Well, I can do a direct peer-to-peer handoff in Atlanta, pull it back to one of our facilities. So again, 5 facilities, one about 11 miles up the road from here in Ladson, all carrier neutral and have major peering points. So hopefully after today, you guys understand the vision that a Medion has for cloud. I think it falls directly in line with what the OpenStacks of the world, what the open source community is trying to build for an ecosystem. And then we bring a small piece that others can't, and that's we can still support and tailor legacy applications and still get you in that ecosystem. You may be 5 years away. Dip your toe in now with no lock-in.
Awesome. Thanks, Brad.
Yep, thank you.
Great. I want to get you guys back up. We've got 5 minutes for some Q&A. So again, awesome job, and thank you so much for talking about the private cloud and the hybrid cloud. Anybody have some questions?
So you both talked about lock-in, and it's a different model. Salesforce, the software as a service, isn't that the ultimate lock-in, and what's your view on that?
You want to go first? You want me to?
Go for it.
Okay. So I agree. I do think it is the ultimate lock-in. The problem becomes, though, in most of the software as a service offerings, that lock-in, depending on who it is and how big of a player, sometimes that lock-in may be worth it. I hate to say it, but Office 365 running your Exchange and your messaging servers,
Good option.
I'm not real sure why you would continue to build out new greenfield messaging systems. Now, you take in something like, in healthcare, you take something like an Epic. Well, you might want your electronic healthcare records closer to you, more control. So a software as a service offering from someone like that may be not quite as good an option as some of the other SaaS providers at a larger scale.
No, I completely agree. I think it is the ultimate vendor lock-in, and when I look at it from an open source perspective and sort of commoditizing things, I mean, infrastructure is sort of commoditized from the bottom up, right? So Linux itself as the base operating system is fairly commodity and widely available, and we're moving up and up the stack into the application layer and cloud infrastructure, and software as a service is higher up. I mean, I'd love to see great open source options that are nearly as easy to run your own on someone's public infrastructure cloud. The reality is not so clear, and so you have, with anything you have a choice between what are the convenience that they provide you, just being able to use it right out of the box, or having to build your own, something else. So.
I think what we'll see upcoming is software or software as a service migration and conversion tools, just like we do now with the major providers. I'm a Google or Gmail client. Well, I can immediately or directly port into Office 365. I think those connectors, people will start to build more and more of them, so that the SaaS lock-in is not so traumatic.
Another question? Okay, well, I have a question. Being a developer, I always think of features, and there's an awesome lot of benefits that we see with this, but can you name one feature or innovative feature that your services provide that someone else like a public cloud might not provide? Who wants to go first?
Gotcha.
It's a fantastic question. Give me a second. Let me think of a good one.
So I think for us, our key feature is going to be the ability to consume basically any workload that's out there. That seems to be a leg up. You can't EC2, rack space, or AWS rack space, Azure. They can't consume every workload. We can consume basically any non-Spark and IBM workload. So the ability to come to cloud and get into cloud with really no barriers to entry.
Russell?
Yeah, I think for OpenStack, it's the fact that we're taking this thing, which is an awesome model of computing and consuming computing and commoditizing it. So making it more widely available, making it cheaper, and the promise of open APIs and interoperability. It's sort of like, it's really more of a promise of an ecosystem and a more level playing field across the industry. And I think that's really what's most promising about OpenStack. In terms of what you get, it's actually quite similar. I mean, we're commoditizing the things that have been proven out in Amazon.
Very cool, very cool. Well, awesome, and thank you guys so much for being here. I hope this was informative, and we'll continue to innovate and continue to have some awesome talks like this.
Tom, you want to briefly talk about Code Talks on October 22nd?
Yes, October 22nd, we're going to have 6 fairly immersive code talks by local presenters here, all top in various organizations and primarily focused around the front end stack. We feel a lot of developments moving towards the front end, so we wanted to get 6 speakers focusing on really providing tools, insights, their secrets on how they build world-class applications. So I think it'll be a little bit of a cutting edge and also very informative. So we're looking forward to that.
Yeah, just the reason I bring it up is that it's currently sold out from the current capacity. But now there's probably about 4 standbys or waitlist folks in there. If we get another 20, we probably move the venue and kind of grow it a little bit. So if you guys are interested, I would just say it's sitting in our calendar on the digital quarter, and it's sitting in Code Camp, which is our education initiative. I would go in there and just basically go to the wait list, because that's the only way we're going to tell that there's more interest. But other than that, it's like I said, it's currently sold out. The other thing is that it's followed by we've had a quarter bash, so we've had basically an event every year. We're kind of morphing that, so it's followed by basically a gathering for an hour and a half, a barbecue and craft beer event next door. So it's an all day. It starts at 9 o'clock and runs to 5. So just let us know if there's more interest. We'll move the venue, but there's certainly a cost associated with moving the venue. But I just kind of leave that out there.
Well, have a great weekend, and thank you so much for coming.
Yeah, thank you all for coming.
Appreciate it.
Yeah, thanks.